Thank you, President. Thank you, Conference. Great pleasure to be here with you today. May I bring you fraternal royal greetings to your brothers and sisters at ASLEF. The hardest thing I've had to do for the last day and a bit is sit back at the back of that room on my hands and not get up and support you in virtually every motion that's been before you. It's been a stunning conference, a good debate, but also shows the strength of feeling of the working class, because we are a class. And it's time that we stood up for ourselves. And it's time that we, as a movement, moved along. We can no longer take what's happening to our communities. We can no longer take what's happening in civil society. A famous Scottish socialist once said, "Where we meet as friends and leave as comrades." I hope to leave as your comrade today. One of the greatest honours I had was at the TUC the other year, seconding your motion on £10 an hour. But I did say at the end of it, once we get the £10 an hour, let's move it on. We can't do what we did with the minimum wage, make it become the maximum wage. £10 the basis, and it's got to be dynamic, and it has to move forward and forward and forward so people have a real living wage. Can I pay tribute to the Met strikers? Stunning. Industrial force at its best. Young people getting up, fighting for themselves with their comrades. But let us say something else. We all fight. As you heard, I started in this industry in 1984. I started fighting then and I keep fighting now. Young fight, middle-aged fight, old fight, we fight together. We are a community, we are a force, and we are a way forward, and we should do it together. And just in case anyone's interested, I don't like prawns, I don't drink champagne. I'd also like to say, it's a real privilege to be here at your 100th conference in the 171 years of the Bakers Union. And I think you're in a safe pair of hands with Ronnie and Ian, better than the Liverpool goalkeeper. I own that one. Of course, what does offend me, and should offend us all, that we're going to be the first generation that leaves our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren worse off than we were. I came from a working class background. Strange enough, I went to primary school under Grenfell. My mum and dad still lives in the council house down the road. And all my parents ever wanted from me and my sister was that a better life, a better education, a better opportunity. My dad said to me, "I don't care what you do as long as you choose to do it, and you should have the right to try and attain it." And that's what we need. We need real social mobility, and we need the opportunity to everybody, regardless of class, regardless of money, to have that opportunity to move forward through our communities, through our civil society, and through life. And we've got to stop paying for our education. We need not to saddle the future with debt. And of course, at the same time, we've seen the drop in the number of working class people going to university because they're settled with a mortgage that they can't afford. Well, what's the solution by the Tories? We'll have academisation and we'll pay headmasters 250 grand a year. Or in nice areas, we'll have grammar schools, because that's really fair. So we'll have better schools for the better people to compete for, and leave everybody else behind where we can't afford books, we can't afford pencils, and we can't afford proper education. While I'm here, I want to pay tribute to the Northern Rail strikers who are fighting for safety on the railway. I also want to pay tribute to the workers in Merseyrail that have been out for over a year. I get up every day and I don't have to look at things to get angry about anymore. There was a time when I was younger, I was scrabbling around for the next battle, the next fight. But living in the sixth richest nation in the world, where they announced this week we've got 1.5 million people living in destitution. Over 4 million people have used food banks. Homelessness in our major cities has doubled or trebled in the last couple of years. That can't be right. That has to be wrong. And I don't care what your political background is. If you can't see that's wrong, you're not doing the right job. So what do we do next? What is the answer? It isn't one person, but he is the person we're going to get behind. Jeremy Corbyn is a socialist. Jeremy Corbyn believes what we believe, but so now does the Labour Party. It's the Labour Party of old. It's the Labour Party in a post-war consensus that could rebuild 2 million homes and create the NHS. Because austerity. is a political choice. What happened in the year of the bankers' crash? What happened in the year of the coalition when they decided austerity was the way forward? It was a year that we paid back Lend-Lease. Lend-Lease was the money that we borrowed from America to fund ourselves during and after the Second World War. If we could pay that back over 60 years, we could pay back the bankers' crisis in the same period of time and not damage our communities and not hurt our own. A Greek philosopher said 2,000 years ago, you judge a society and how it treats its weakest. Well, I'd be ashamed if they judged us today about how we treat the disabled, how we treat people with social care. And of course, Maggie's bubble's bust, hasn't it? The wonderful thing for me is, I grew up near Grenfell, but nobody I grew up with lives around there. Because when I was a kid, in Westminster and under Maggie, if you were a council tenant, they'd let you buy your house. And you could buy it at a 70% discount. And a lot of people took advantage of that, and I don't blame them, because they were sold a full stream. But of course then, if you're in the centre of London or a centre of any major city and there's no land to build on, and you sell your housing stock at 70% less than it's worth, how do you replace it? How do you create a future and social housing for future generations? No, what you do then is, people after 3 years they sell it, maximise their profits, the areas become gentrified, and communities are destroyed, and people who grew up in places no longer can afford where they live. Of course, that causes us another problem. If you can't afford to live where you work or where you grew up, you have to travel. And every year, in my industry, fares go up. And they were surprised this year that season ticket sales went down by 9% in January. Well, if you've got 0-hours contracts, faux self-employment, and you don't know if you're not working next week, are you going to buy a monthly season ticket? Are you going to buy a yearly season ticket? Are you going to pay travel extortionate fees they have to pay on our railway, not their railway? No, you're not. It's time that we brought the railways back into public ownership, along with water, utilities, the mail, and everything else they took away from us. After Carillion and one or two things, you'll understand why I'm not too keen on KPMG and Price Waterhouse and some of these big four accounting firms. But I went to one of these think tanks and I asked a question, can you tell me a successful privatisation? And they reeled off all these figures and these numbers. Oh, the hedge funds got this and the shareholders got that. I said, no. Can you tell me one successful privatisation for the taxpayer or the consumer or the end user? And they couldn't. Prices have gone through the roof. These people aren't interested in maintaining the utilities. They're interested in maximising their profits. And the idea that they were going to rebuild them for the greater good will only be done when they increase their prices even more. Therefore, if we're going to pay for it through the front door, pay for the back door, the only thing about privatisation is we build it, we give it away, and they earn from it. Stop it now. I was going to do a bit about Grenfell, but that wonderful motion you've just done has stolen my thunder. But I will make one point. If you get the opportunity, look at Matt Rack's contribution on Durham miners. It's so moving, it's quite frightening. And along with the colleague down there who highlighted quite rightly the poor design of these buildings. The other thing they did under Cameron was red tape. You can only have one bit of health and safety law for every 50 bits you take off the statute books. But one of the things they did was took away the right of the fire brigade to inspect buildings. Any one of you in this room can be a fire inspector. You put a little plate up outside your house or your front door, and you can go and inspect the building and say it's safe. You don't have to have any qualifications, and that is a terrifying thing in the 21st century. And what we don't know yet is the number of schools, government buildings, nursing homes and hospitals that have cladding. And out of the 200 tower blocks that have been identified, there's only work going on in 7, and we have another tragedy waiting to happen. But the most frightening thing about Grenfell was that cladding wasn't for the tenants. It was in one of the poshest areas of London where they sit on £247 million of money that they put the cheapest cladding on with no fire resistance because they didn't like the look of those buildings and it was hurting their property prices. That is a crying shame, and they should be ashamed of themselves, the council should be ashamed of themselves, and there should be an inquest and an inquiry to bring them to account. I was interested in your debate this week about 0 hours and casualisation. It's coming to my industry. The fly-by-nights in the freight sector, we've seen 600 jobs go in the last 2 years through the loss of coal, loss of steel. But we're seeing people creeping in, people who retired years ago, who apparently now still got the skill set to drive trains. And to their shame, they will try and do it cheaper than the people who currently do it, who are trying to make a living and fight for the conditions that are there. Now's our time. Stanley Baldwin in 1926 said, "I provoked a general strike to cause dissension amongst the trade union leadership and hurt the trade unions." And that worked before the Second World War. But after the Second World War, they got scared. They didn't get scared by big titles like General Secretary or President or whatever. They got scared of workers. So when workers organised in the building industry, we ended up with Shrewsbury. When workers organised in the mining industry, we ended up with Orgreave. And they still won't tell the truth about those. But when we get back into the power, we will tell the truth. Workers have a right to stand. Workers have a right to fight. We have a right to complain and we have a right to be treated with dignity. Comrades, colleagues, my pleasure to be here with you today. Your fight is our fight. Let's keep fighting. Thank you.